Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne came out on October 12, 2004 on the PlayStation 2 for North America. The game released to critical success and definitely spiked a lot of interest in Megaton for the Western audience. SMT3 was unlike anything else at the time, and it still is to this day. Here we are 17 years later, and I am glad to report that Nocturne aged fantastically. Thank you to Sega of America and Atlus West for providing me with a review copy of Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne HD Remastered for the Nintendo Switch. This review is a spoilers-free review. Note that there might be some minor spoilers in the visuals completely unrelated to the plot of the game if you're watching the video footage on screen. For this review, I will first deep dive into Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne as a game looking at the story, the music, and the gameplay. Then I will give you my honest opinion on the quality of this remaster, looking at the performance, the new additions, the DLCs, and much more. Note that the gameplay on screen was recorded on a docked Nintendo Switch. The story in Nocturne starts off with you as the protagonist, a normal high school student, and you go to the hospital to visit your teacher. But you quickly realize that there is a lot of shady things going on at this hospital. After a bit of exploration, you realize that cults are actually in the hospital and you get involved in it all. This is when it happens, the Tokyo conception. You are dropped into a new world with no explanations, a new Tokyo. You become the demi-fiend, semi-man, semi-demon. A new world is born. A new way to live. What is going on? At first, you seem like a pawn in this massive new world full of demons and cult leaders, but you quickly realize that your potential is immense. As the demi-fiend, you can recruit demons and decide on which side of reason you want to be. This story and plot is for you to discover, and your actions will define this new world. I strongly believe that the best way to experience this story is to go in as blind as possible, so this is why I will leave it at that for my summary of the story. Nocturne's story at first may seem simple, but as you progress through the game, you realize how intense and deep this whole plot about a new Tokyo, reasons, and demons actually is. This story is presented to the player in a near perfect way, being dropped in a new world, feeling the need to look for anyone that might be able to help you in your journey, and explore every little corner of the map is part of the Shin Megami Tensei 3 experience, and it's great. When you first start your playthrough and you explore this dark and empty hospital, all the souls wandering around are explaining to you what is going on, and it's very satisfying to go through. I think where the story really hooked me when I first played Nocturne is when you leave the hospital and see the new Tokyo for the first time. This vast and unknown world was crazy to me 10 years ago, and it still is to this day. Nocturne is a more or less 50-hour game. Its story is paced in a way that always pulls you back in when you need to drop the game. Exactly what I'm looking for in an RPG. That being said, a good story is worth less if everything surrounding it is average. Thankfully, everything around this unique story is nothing short of astonishing. The soundtrack for Nocturne is composed by Shoji Meguro, a legendary composer at Atlus, known for his work on the Megami Tensei series as a whole and other Atlus titles like Catherine, the Persona series, the Makin series, and much more. Nocturne is some of Meguro's best work in my opinion. From a simple track like the Junk Shot music to a god-tier track like Tokyo Conceptions, every single track in this game fits SMT3 perfectly. This soundtrack is nothing less than amazing. Even without the game, this soundtrack hits on a whole nother level. I have nothing bad to say here. Nocturne sounds great and all, but how does it play, you'll ask? SMT3 is a JRPG with tons of unique elements to it. My favorite thing about the gameplay is without a doubt the combat system. Nocturne uses the press turn combat system. Battles are in a turn-based fashion. You have 4 press turns for every turn. When you use a spell with one of your demons, you lose a press turn. And when you have no more press turns left, it's the enemy's turn. Simple enough, right? Well, it gets more complex as when you hit a critical or exploit the weakness of one of your enemy, the current press turn icon starts flashing. That means that your next move will use the flashing press turn, even if you hit a critical or a weakness. On the other hand, if an enemy repels or absorbs your attack, you lose all your icons. If the enemy nullifies or avoids your attack, you lose 2 icons. As a demi-fiend, you can summon and control the actions of 3 other demons on field at a time. A very fun mechanic too is you can always ask a demon to pass his turn. That will bring his press turn icon to a half, meaning that it's gonna flash. This feature is not talked about enough and definitely adds a ton to the strategy of this battle system. I know you all heard it, Nocturne is super hard, but is it really? Nocturne's combat system is well balanced and expertly crafted. If you know what you're doing, you'll succeed. Sometimes in modern RPGs, you don't really have to think before you act, and this is one of the big issues I have with one of my favorite games of all time, Persona 5. Thankfully, Nocturne excels with its difficulty. It's not an issue here. In the remaster, there is a new difficulty option, being the merciful difficulty mode. When I play my games, I always play them on normal because I feel like this is how the developers intended the game to be played. But options are always great in my opinion. I tested the merciful difficulty in Nocturne, which is the new easy mode of the remaster. I think this mode completely takes off the challenge from the game. I tested the mode on some of the hardest bosses of the game and I was able to auto battle them with an average team. If you are interested in Nocturne's story only and really don't care for the gameplay, then yeah, you can use the merciful mode. But if you want to experience the gameplay, I strongly suggest taking your time and at least trying Nocturne on normal to get a way better experience. Oh, and don't even get me started on the hard mode, man. I did it once and I'll never do it again. When you are not in battle, you explore the vast world of Tokyo by speaking with villagers and souls around town to find your way through the game. You also open chests, clear puzzles, explore large and well-designed dungeons, and recruit demons. That's right, one of the most unique features in Megami Tensei is the ability to talk demons into joining your party. Demon negotiation is a feature that never gets old. Every single time that a new SMT or Persona game comes out, I always look forward to the dialogues with demons as they are a very funny and entertaining experience. And yes, this system is why journalists include SMT in their games like Pokemon videos. Nocturne has over 180 demons to recruit and all of them were designed by the legendary artist Kazuma Kaneko. As much as I like 4 and 4's Apocalypse 2D sprites for demons, seeing those 3D Nocturne models in full HD makes me even more excited for Shin Megami Tensei 5 later this year. Demons in Nocturne are now fully customizable. As your demons level up, they gain access to new spells and some of them can even evolve when they reach a certain level. My favorite feature in Nocturne that makes the game stand out from other monster collecting games is Demon Fusion. In Nocturne, you can get into the Cathedral of Shadows, which allows you to fuse multiple demons together to create a new demon. Oh, and the HD Remaster added skill inheritance, which means that you can also choose the skills that your newly fused demon will inherit from the old demons that you just fused. Demon customization felt massive in 2004 without this feature, and it feels even more in-depth in 2021 with the remaster. Another gameplay feature that never gets old to me is Magatamas. Magatamas are living parasites that you find all around the world. As a demi-fiend, you get to collect all 25 of them and use them to your advantage against your foes. A Magatama comes with changes in your stats and resistance, and they offer you certain spells and techniques as you level up. Those Magatamas increases the level of strategy to a massive level in this game as you get to switch Magatamas all the time outside of battle. Since weaknesses are super important in SMT, changing your Magatama on the fly before battle is a must. Nocturne's gameplay not only has my favorite combat system ever in a video game, but it is also surrounded by a lot of top tier features which easily makes this gameplay some of the best from a Japanese RPG. The dungeons are all very different from one to another, which makes Persona 3, which came after Nocturne, feel like a big downgrade to me. Alright, now we get into the good stuff that some of you are here for. Let's talk about everything new about the HD Remaster that came out last year in Japan and just came out this year. Of course, the first thing to talk about here when we're talking about an HD Remaster are the visuals. I am a big fan of how smooth the menus and text are. They look great, and just those make the remastered my preferred version of SMT3. The overall textures and models of the games were remade to look better on modern aged televisions. They look great, and I am not ashamed to say that the art style of Nocturne aged super well too. The development team went out of their way to add minor effects too. Reflections from the floors, increased lighting effects through windows, or effects when walking on water makes this PlayStation 2 classic look like a modern RPG. But on rare occasions, you'll find some PS2 models that clearly were not touched at all. Not a deal breaker, it just makes for some funny moments. Of course, I also have to mention the aspect ratio, as this was definitely a big controversy when Japanese coverage of the game came out last winter. The whole game uses a widescreen aspect ratio to fit modern televisions, but certain cutscenes were left untouched. When you see them, they look awful, and I'm being very honest here. While this is definitely a bummer, I think people are overreacting to this lack of widescreen in certain cutscenes. The reason for that is simple. There is around 10 of those cutscenes in the whole game, and most of those are under 2 minutes long, so for a 50 hours game, you get around 20 minutes of cutscenes in a 4:3 aspect ratio. Don't get me wrong, this aspect ratio looks weird and should have been changed for a re-release called a remastered, but it is far from a deal breaker as some make it out to be. What is a deal breaker to some though is the performance of this so-called remaster. For Nocturne HD, I was given a Nintendo Switch review copy, which is perfect because I am a big fan of the hybrid nature of the system. The game is 1080p docked 30 frames per second and 720p 30 frames per second in portable mode. Compared to the other versions, the PC and PlayStation 4, there's nothing to be ashamed of as both the PC and PS4 versions are running at 1080p and are locked at 30 FPS. Loading times are almost the same too, which is great to see because Persona 5 Strikers had significantly longer load times on Nintendo Switch than other platforms, but obviously, Persona 5 Strikers was a way more demanding game than Nocturne ever was. Nocturne HD almost has no loading times on all platforms, which is awesome to see. Now everything sounds perfectly fine, right? Well, the big issue here is the frame rate. Not only is it locked at 30, which to me is not a problem for an RPG, but it is also unstable 30. When you watch cutscenes, you're traveling around the world, talking to characters, everything is perfectly stable. Stable 30 frames per second. In combat is where it gets interesting. After talking with other creators and watching a ton of footage from the PlayStation 4 version of the game that I didn't play, here is how the frame rate is. On Switch, docked, the game drops in frames during combat when using multi-spells or when too much is going on screen at the same time. Those frame drops are minor and bearable to me, but they still feel horrible as this is a PlayStation 2 game now running on 100 times more powerful hardware. And it's struggling. I cannot tell you why, but on Switch, portably, it runs just like the PlayStation 4, meaning that the frame drops are at the same moments as the docked Nintendo Switch version, but they are less significant. I am not one to count frames, but having experience with both, this is my take on this whole performance thing. As much as I loved every single moment of my 60 hours playthrough of Nocturne, I definitely feel like Nocturne deserved a bit more love and should have been a perfectly stable experience on PlayStation 4, PC, and Switch in 2021. Again, a bummer, but not a deal breaker to me at least. If it is to you, I cannot blame you though. Alright, that was a bit underwhelming, so let's talk about the positive stuff because this HD remaster also brings a ton of good things with it. SMT3 Nocturne is now fully voiced, even in English. I am very happy to report that the English voice actors did the characters justice. My personal favorites here are the Collector, Mannequin, and Fiends in the game, voiced by Chris Atney, Hikawa voiced by Connor Fogarty, and finally Laura Post as Yuka. I know some of y'all prefer Japanese voices for games, and don't worry, this remaster got you covered as you can turn off the voice acting, and you can also switch between English and Japanese voices at any time during your playthrough.
Here is what my master has to say. It involves the menorah you acquired.
Nocturne HD offers a lot of optional DLC too. I don't want to spend too much time on those because to be very honest with you guys, I don't think they're worth it. My review copy came as the deluxe edition of the game, meaning that I got and tested all of the DLC. And the one DLC pack that I think is pretty cool for longtime fans of Shin Megami Tensei is the BGM packs. This DLC allows you to change the background music in the Vortex world while exploring and in battle. You can change from Nocturne's soundtrack to SMT 1, 2, 4, and 4 Apocalypse. For the price, I think that's cool. But again, just like all the other DLCs, I think it should have been included in the base game since this remaster is $50. Is the game worth $50? Pricing is subjective. To some people it is, while to others it isn't. I think Nocturne as a game is absolutely worth $50, but if you think you don't get your money's worth with this re-release, once again, I cannot blame you. You know how I mentioned that the music in Nocturne is amazing? Well, another controversy surrounding this remaster is in fact the music too. The problem here is the fact that back in the PS2 days, the music was compressed to fit on DVDs. But now, even if the orchestrated soundtrack for this game already exists, Atlus decided to put the compressed music in the remaster. This is a big missed opportunity in my opinion, but I still gotta admit that this soundtrack sounds great even when playing the PS2 game. So for me, this was again, I keep saying that today, but it was a bummer. Just not a deal breaker. Other than the orchestrated soundtrack, I wish there was a couple of other things added in the remaster. Skill inheritance during Demon Fusion was the biggest thing that I wanted them to add, because when the game launched in Japan last year, it was nowhere to be found, but thankfully they added that later. I would have liked to get an auto text feature too. This is a very minor thing, but as I get older and play a lot of RPGs, I like to just watch the cutscenes while the text auto plays on screen. Very minor complaint of mine, especially for a game like SMT3, which isn't super text heavy, but just another feature that I kind of miss and wish was in the game. Oh, another great feature that they decided to add in this game is the new suspend feature. That was not in the original game. Nocturne is a long game, and you can only save at terminals. Adding the ability to save everywhere would have been problematic, as it would take off some of the challenge from the base game. So they added the suspend feature. This feature allows you to suspend your game at any time, and when you boot up the game later in the day, you choose continue on the main menu instead of load game, which allows you to keep going where you left off. Other than that, I think they did a fantastic job with the new graphics and added gameplay feature. I personally think though that at a $50 price point, all the DLC available for the game, including the Dante DLC, should have been included. So those were my thoughts on Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne HD Remaster, the base Nocturne game, and also the new things that came with the remaster. Thank you very much for watching this review, and a massive thank you to Atlus West for providing this review copy for me to review. If you like this video and are thinking about buying SMT3 Nocturne for the first time, please drop a like to show your support. If you don't know, I also made a video giving my 5 tips for newcomers of Nocturne, and also a before you buy video going in depth about all the little things that you should consider before buying the game, so please check it out. The links to both those videos is down in the description below. If you are new to my channel, please consider subscribing, and don't forget to ring the little bell icon to get notified every single time that I upload about anything Atlus, Shin Megami Tensei, and Persona. Thank you all for your time, I appreciate that. Peace out.